From the moment she opened her eyes on May 7th, 1923, in Michigan City, Indiana, Anne Baxter seemed destined for a life marked by both art and celebrity, though not always in predictable ways. Her family background alone hinted at something extraordinary. She was the granddaughter of Frank Lloyd Wright, the visionary architect whose groundbreaking designs would shape modern architecture around the world. Even so, Baxter's path into the spotlight wasn't straightforward. She was drawn to performance from an early age, yet she faced obstacles, heartbreaks, and transformation, all of which shaped her into a Golden Globe-winning actress treasured by her peers. Whether on stage, in films, or even on television, her devotion to acting took priority over the glitz of mere stardom. Through her own determination, a childhood fascination with Helen Hayes, and some surprising moments, including a clash with Katharine Hepburn, she ended up heading west to Hollywood in search of more opportunities. Baxter was born at the tail end of the prosperous 1920s. That era is famous for jazz flappers and a swirling economy. But the Great Depression was right around the corner. While Frank Lloyd Wright's name gave the family a certain cultural sheen, it didn't guarantee an easy life for young Anne. Her father was Kenneth Stewart Baxter, and her mother was Catherine Dorothy Wright, one of Frank Lloyd Wright's daughters. Though they enjoyed relative comfort, the hardships of the Depression affected everyone. The family moved to New York City when Anne was still quite small, hoping for a fresh start in a vibrant cultural hub. Manhattan was bursting with life, theaters, creative communities, and new possibilities. Even if money was tight, there was a thrill to living in a place so rich with artistic energy. From early on, Baxter felt at home in stage productions. At age 5, she performed in her first school play. But her life changed forever when she was 10 years old and saw a Broadway show starring Helen Hayes. Hayes, legendary for her presence and skill, mesmerized young Anne. Afterward, Baxter went home declaring that she too would become an actress. Many kids say they want to be performers, but Baxter's resolve never wavered. She pressed on, acting in school shows, pursuing lessons, and honing her craft. Her first Broadway role came at just 13. That's impressive by any measure, especially during the 1930s when the Great Depression forced many teenagers into tough practical jobs. Baxter studied with Maria Uspenskaya, the Russian actress from the Moscow Art Theater who championed the Stanislavski system, emphasizing authenticity and emotional truth. Those lessons molded Baxter into a serious performer, clearly distinct from the many stage kids who relied on cutesy tricks. She was dead set on being real. Yet at 19, Baxter got an abrupt shock. She won a spot in a play alongside Katharine Hepburn, only to be removed when Hepburn decided Baxter wasn't right for the role. Some aspiring actors would have quit, but Baxter used that disappointment as fuel. If Broadway didn't want her, she'd try Hollywood. Heading west, she set her sights on film work. That shift would change her fate, turning her from a hopeful theater actor into a recognized star of Hollywood's golden age. Still, breaking into Hollywood meant more challenges. During the height of the studio system, newcomers often faced strict typecasting. They could get stuck playing the ingenue, the comedic sidekick, or the glamorous starlet, whatever the system demanded. Baxter did bring a grounded sense of stage technique, but she also had to compete for every chance. As World War II raged, studios cranked out patriotic pictures and light escapism. Baxter landed smaller roles at first, gradually building credibility. One of her earliest prominent appearances was in Orson Welles' The Magnificent Ambersons, 1942. That project showed she could project warmth on film, even when her part wasn't huge. At that time, she was under studio contract, which meant limited control over what she did. But she slowly made a name for herself, drawing notice for her sincerity. By her early 20s, she'd racked up a decent number of credits. She didn't fit the mold of the bombshell star. She looked more like the quiet, earnest girl next door. Directors and audiences picked up on her authenticity. Still, she felt something was missing. Sometimes she got slotted into too many nice girl roles. She believed she could do more, and she held out for deeper characters. Her big breakthrough arrived with The Razor's Edge in 1946. Directed by Edmund Goulding and based on W. Somerset Maugham's novel, the film centered on existential angst in the aftermath of World War I. Baxter portrayed Sophie MacDonald, a woman crushed by grief who turns to alcoholism. This was serious territory for Hollywood in the 1940s, and Baxter's portrayal drew on her real-life pain. She had lost a younger brother at age 3, so she knew tragedy firsthand. That gave her portrayal a raw edge. She later said this was her one truly great performance. Audiences and critics agreed. She won an Oscar for Best Supporting Actress and also earned a Golden Globe. That success confirmed she had real skill and that she could handle complexity beyond what anyone had offered her before. Even so, her journey remained bumpy. After The Razor's Edge, the usual typecasting issues threatened to confine her to similar tragic figure roles. She wanted to avoid being stuck in that corner. In 1950, though, she got a part that would place her in cinematic history, All About Eve. Written and directed by Joseph L. Mankiewicz, it told the tale of Eve Harrington, Baxter, an ambitious young actress who worms her way into the life of Broadway superstar Margot Channing, played by Bette Davis. Celeste Holm, George Sanders, and a young Marilyn Monroe rounded out an unforgettable cast. Baxter got the role partly because she looked similar to Claudette Colbert, who was supposed to star as Margot but couldn't follow through. When casting was rearranged, Baxter slipped into the role of Eve. She was thrilled, though slightly anxious about going toe-to-toe with Bette Davis. Rumors of on-set tension between Baxter and Davis spread quickly. Studios often fanned such gossip to heighten audience interest. According to Baxter, she and Davis were actually on good terms. She recalled how Davis would jokingly make hissing snake sounds at her, a bit of fun rather than malice. The supposed rivalry escalated around awards season. The producers wanted Baxter to submit herself for supporting actress, leaving Davis to run for Best Actress so they wouldn't split the vote. Baxter refused. They both ended up in the Best Actress category, effectively canceling each other out. Judy Holliday won for Born Yesterday. Publicists seized on the drama. Baxter maintained that the tension was more or less made up, and she counted All About Eve as one of her happiest sets. Her portrayal of Eve was partly inspired by an understudy she'd known at age 13. That understudy was apparently so cutthroat that Baxter never forgot it. The real person's behavior was unflattering enough that Baxter used strong words to describe them. That experience helped Baxter create Eve, who veers between shy politeness and ruthless ambition. She made Eve Harrington into a timeless cinematic figure, an up-and-comer who not only craves approval, but is ready to steal the spotlight at any cost. In her personal life, she married actor John Hodiak on July 7th, 1946. He was known for roles like Hitchcock's Lifeboat. They had a daughter, Katrina, in 1951. Unfortunately, the marriage faltered. They divorced in 1953. Baxter initially explained that they were simply incompatible, but in her later book, Intermission, she admitted that her own actions had contributed. The distance between them grew so great that they hardly spoke. She once picked a fight just to spark some reaction. That argument ended with the word divorce finally out in the open. Her second marriage was to Randolph Galt in 1960. He owned a cattle station in a remote corner near Sydney, Australia. The couple met when Baxter was filming in that region. She left Hollywood behind to live there. The experience proved intense. She had 2 children, stayed in a 26-room house, learned about ranch life, cooked, and rode horses. She called it lonely and exhausting. The nearest town was 90 minutes away by Jeep. Eventually, she and Galt divorced in 1970, and Baxter stayed on the ranch for a while, writing about her trials and tribulations in her book Intermission. That book is a window into how tough it was to juggle motherhood, isolation, and the memory of Hollywood's bright lights. Though she dipped in and out of acting, she never abandoned it completely. One of her best-known roles came with Cecil B. DeMille's The 10 Commandments, 1956. Co-starring Charlton Heston and Yul Brynner, Baxter took on the part of Queen Nefertiti, a role that let her show off a dazzling, exotic presence. The movie became one of the greatest biblical epics, still screened frequently during religious holidays. It also introduced Baxter to a new audience who might not have known her earlier, more dramatic roles. Later, she moved into television, popping up in the Alfred Hitchcock Hour, Batman, as Zelda the Great, and finally landing on series like The Love Boat and Hotel. In Hotel, which ran from 1983 to 1988, she played Victoria Cabot until her life was cut short. On December 4th, 1985, she suffered a brain aneurysm while hailing a taxi on Madison Avenue in New York. She collapsed and was rushed to Lenox Hill Hospital, placed on life support for 8 days, and then passed away on December 12, 1985, at age 62. In a poignant echo of her family background, she was buried at the Lloyd Jones Cemetery in Wisconsin, on land owned by Frank Lloyd Wright's family. With her personal ups and downs, Baxter's professional reputation remained high. She earned her Hollywood Walk of Fame star and insisted she was always an actress, never a personality. She didn't want a fixed persona, something many big stars of her era clung to. "I do what I do from inside someone else's skin," she said, reminding everyone that she played roles, not herself. While there's no direct record that Frank Lloyd Wright shaped her acting style, they both shared a certain spirit of innovation. Wright changed the norms of architecture, and Baxter pushed herself to explore emotional authenticity rather than just repeating a single-star image. They each took risks, refusing to accept limitations imposed by tradition. Over time, film historians and fans have appreciated Baxter in many ways. Some rave about her cunning, layered performance as Eve Harrington in All About Eve. Others cherish her tragic role in The Razor's Edge. Still others point to the spectacle of The 10 Commandments. Some discover lesser-known gems like I Confess, 1953, directed by Alfred Hitchcock, where Baxter's nuanced acting stands out. Throughout her filmography, she played women who faced moral dilemmas or deep emotional challenges. Her personal life, with its divorces and big moves, likely influenced her readiness to take on complicated characters. She sometimes had to navigate forced changes. She was let go by Katharine Hepburn, nearly overshadowed in the Oscar race, and literally uprooted herself to live in Australia. But each challenge seemed to deepen her. She learned to adapt and remain true to her vision of authentic acting, never letting star politics distract her. When it came to All About Eve, producers kept pushing that rumor of rivalry with Bette Davis. But Baxter revealed that Davis's famous tough gal reputation wasn't how she experienced her co-star. They had fun, even joking about the supposed feud by making snake noises. The Oscar split was just bad luck for them both. It created a drama that the tabloids loved, turning them into two big contenders who ended up canceling each other out in the final vote. Tragedy shaped her talents too. The early loss of her little brother created a well of grief she could tap into for her performances. Her role in The Razor's Edge required her to portray a woman who loses her husband and child. It stirred up painful memories of her own family's sorrow. Baxter credits the method-style training from Maria Uspensky, urging her to draw on real emotions and personal history. That authenticity became a hallmark of her acting. Her relationship with John Hodiak also reveals the cost of being busy in Hollywood. They worked nonstop, so they drifted apart without big fights. Eventually, Baxter tried to jolt him with an argument, hoping to break the ice. It ended in divorce. She admitted in intermission that she took her share of the blame for not communicating better. Marriage and stardom were a hard mix. Then she married Randolph Galt and tried life in the Australian outback. That, too, was a shock. She wrote about the long, hot days, the endless chores, and feeling alone. While it didn't last, those years gave her new insights about self-reliance and about what really mattered to her. She described the births of her children, the daily tasks of ranch work, and the separation from any big city. Though challenging, it was a period of personal growth that she later channeled into her writing. By the 1970s, Baxter took fewer film roles. She'd proven her range. She was no longer the ingenue and didn't want to be. She found occasional cameos, guest spots, or roles in TV movies, ones that appealed to her. Hollywood had changed. The era of epic studios was giving way to new Hollywood, with different stars and approaches. Baxter didn't cling to the past. She picked projects that felt right. She also stepped into the relatively new realm of episodic television to find fresh audiences. Younger viewers got to know her through reruns or by seeing her in current shows. Critics sometimes mentioned her link to Frank Lloyd Wright, wondering if it helped her. Yet her success clearly came from her own determination. She hardly talked about her famous grandfather, preferring to let her work speak for itself. She aimed for authenticity, a quality she had admired in Helen Hayes from that early age of 10. She showed it too with her stage influences. Unlike other Golden Age stars whose image stayed the same in every film, Baxter slipped inside characters. She wanted to vanish into roles, not just rely on a star persona. She stuck to that approach even when it meant fighting with directors or producers who might have wanted a more uniform brand. This stance occasionally made things tough, but she ended up with a fascinating set of performances. In her lesser-known roles, like I Confess, she revealed that she could handle suspense too. She used that same authenticity to add tension to dark stories. She also popped up in The Blue Gardenia, 1953, and Carnival Story, 1954, jumping between film noir and melodrama. Her background in theater kept her comfortable working in multiple genres. She returned to the stage from time to time, particularly in summer stock. It reminded her of her roots, that sense of immediate connection to an audience. Even with her film success, she never lost her love of theater, an art form she'd adored since she was a little girl in a Broadway seat, mesmerized by Helen Hayes. She admitted that the big studios often blocked her from doing more stage work, but she squeezed it in whenever she could. As she got older, Baxter reflected openly on the illusions of fame. She spoke of heartbreaks, replacements, and dealing with major life changes. Sometimes she took long breaks to refocus on her children, but she never regretted her path. She saw each struggle as a teacher. Even if she wasn't a mainstream box office giant, she earned the respect of those who valued genuine acting. She's still remembered in different ways. Fans of All About Eve debate the rivalry storyline. People who love The Razor's Edge still find her heartbreak compelling. Others admire the grand style of the Ten Commandments. And some have discovered her cameo appearances in old TV shows, finding a playful side to her personality. Her range and adaptability are undeniable. She remained aware that Hollywood legends like Bette Davis, Joan Crawford, and Barbara Stanwyck often kept a distinct style or persona across roles. Baxter, on the other hand, aimed for transformations. That might be why she isn't automatically recognized today as a single, unchanging icon. Instead, she leaves a legacy of varied performances, each guided by her commitment to the craft. One persistent question is which of her roles best represents her. Some say Eve Harrington from All About Eve because that character left such a cultural mark. Others vote for Sophie MacDonald in The Razor's Edge due to the emotional depth and the awards she earned. And of course, many admire Nefertiti in The Ten Commandments. From classics to more obscure projects, she always showed the same authenticity. She also tackled comedic appearances in variety shows, letting fans see a lighter side. While Hollywood soared into the 1960s and 1970s, Baxter stood at that cross-section of multiple eras, coming from the glamorous studio system, embracing TV, living through major social change, and eventually adapting to the shifting taste of a younger generation. She displayed impressive flexibility, a skill that film historians appreciate when analyzing an actress who managed to bridge so many transitions. She lived through the final years of big studio dominance, saw the dawn of television's golden age, watched the evolving film scene of the 1960s, and entered the 1980s with steady TV roles. That timeline alone shows her resilience. She also enjoyed the occasional comedic or variety show cameo, like ones hosted by Dean Martin, which might surprise people who only knew her for serious drama. Those appearances signaled her willingness to laugh at herself and to connect with audiences on a different level. Her personal journey was multi-layered. She lost her brother, suffered divorces, and relocated halfway around the world. Yet she kept moving forward. Unlike some stars, she didn't rely on scandal for attention. She built a solid reputation for honest performances. By refusing to be pigeonholed, she avoided being pinned as just a glamorous starlet or a tragic figure. She carved out a more nuanced place in film history. In 2012, her star still gleamed on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Fans visited to remember the actress who merged stage discipline with screen magnetism. Baxter's quiet pride in being an actress, not a personality, rings true today. It explains why directors and co-stars respected her. She wasn't part of the Hollywood hype machine to the same extent as many of her contemporaries. For those who watch All About Eve, Baxter's Eve Harrington remains a symbol of calculated ambition wrapped in sweet innocence. That duality feels real because Baxter knew how to tap into her own experiences. She encountered plenty of ambition backstage in her teens, so she poured that memory into Eve. But she also took care to differentiate herself from the character. She found Eve's behavior nasty, but she recognized its dramatic punch. When people asked her to name her best work, she usually came back to The Razor's Edge. It was a genuinely draining role, but it netted her an Oscar and a Golden Globe. She had to depict the downward spiral of a woman clinging to hope after tragedy. That level of pain mirrored her own brother's death. To stand in front of a camera and summon that kind of sorrow took a toll. She credited her training, along with the raw memories, for letting her pull it off. Critics and audiences found it unforgettable. She also balanced motherhood with all these demands. Between her marriages, she raised children and tried to give them a sense of stability, even as they lived in unusual conditions, be it on a Hollywood set or a remote ranch in Australia. Though she missed the bright lights at times, she also appreciated stepping away to focus on her kids. That push and pull between personal life and performance shaped a lot of her choices. All this led to an actor who never seemed to phone it in. Every role, be it a starring part or a small cameo, felt lived in. Plenty of starlets from the 1940s were primarily eye candy or comedic relief. Baxter showed she could be romantic, tragic, regal, funny, or manipulative, all while maintaining credibility. Years after her passing, her adaptability continues to impress. Her abrupt death in 1985 cut short a chapter that might have brought more TV roles, or even a return to the stage. She was 62 and still appearing on Hotel, which means she kept working right up to that sudden end. The aneurysm hit out of nowhere while she was on Madison Avenue, leaving fans stunned. Her passing signaled the loss of one of the last golden age figures still active in contemporary productions. Many colleagues and admirers paid tribute, highlighting her warmth and the honesty she brought to every project. They didn't focus on rumors or petty drama, just her solid work and kind spirit. In retrospective interviews, critics often talk about Baxter's quiet revolution. She didn't brand herself or chase tabloids. Instead, she let her artistry do the talking. This pattern is why each new wave of classic film fans can discover her afresh. They watch All About Eve and see someone who can match Bette Davis line for line, or they catch The Razor's Edge and are shaken by her portrayal of grief, or they see The Ten Commandments and appreciate her grand entrance as Nefertiti. Eventually, many learn about her personal story, her link to Frank Lloyd Wright, her Australian sojourn, her multiple marriages, and her unwavering commitment to authenticity. It's a life that doesn't fit a simple narrative, which makes it all the more intriguing. Her final legacy may lie in that question. Which Anne Baxter performance do you remember best? Some gravitate to the slyness of Eve Harrington, others prefer the heartbreak of Sophie, and still others want to rewatch her leading moments in epics or lesser-known films. Each person finds a different facet of Baxter's acting. She also resonates with those who value the craft, people who see acting as a discipline, not just a route to fame. She wrote in Intermission about the hard, lonely days in Australia, cooking for ranch workers, caring for babies, and longing for the stage all at once. She admitted she was sometimes frustrated. Still, she never seemed bitter about her path. Instead, she acknowledged that stepping away from the spotlight gave her perspective. That drive for meaning outside Hollywood circles might be why she worked so diligently, to be a true performer, not just a marquee idol. It also ties back to her first stage epiphany at age 10, watching Helen Hayes and deciding that she wanted to move people the way Hayes did. That early spark guided her choices, from the era of black and white hits to color epics, and then into television. No matter what role she played, she aimed for genuine feeling. That's a big reason her work still resonates. She put her heart into each character, whether that meant comedic scenes or harrowing drama. The question, which Anne Baxter fact did you find most interesting, might reveal just how vast her story is. Was it her direct link to Frank Lloyd Wright? The anecdote about Katharine Hepburn having her replaced? The move to Australia? Or the rumored feud with Bette Davis that she said never really happened? Or maybe her unique method of using real grief in The Razor's Edge? Each part forms a piece of a life that combined determination, curiosity, and a willingness to take risks. For those who haven't explored Baxter's filmography, it's worth sampling it across different decades. Notice how she molds herself to the era, embracing the polished studio style of the 1940s, the more psychologically driven roles of the 1950s, epic sagas, and eventually the small screen world of the 1970s and 1980s. She seems comfortable everywhere. That ease is the mark of a performer who draws from a well of inner resources rather than external gimmicks. When she died, the film world lost one of its more under-the-radar yet consistently brilliant actresses. She left behind a star on Hollywood Boulevard, a shelf of awards, and a wide body of work. Fans can still stand by her star, on the Walk of Fame to remember a woman who insisted on being known for her acting rather than her name or her image. She had grown up among creative legends, but she carved out her own identity through sheer skill and perseverance. And now, whether someone's partial to All About Eve or The Razor's Edge or any other role, there's a good chance they'll come away impressed by her dedication. She was unafraid of heartbreak or vulnerability both on and off screen. Even if she never reached the same pop culture status as some of her contemporaries, she remains a go-to reference for those who appreciate subtlety and range. Her legacy stands strong for anyone who looks closely at 20th century film history. So maybe the real takeaway is that Baxter's story is about sincerity triumphing over showbiz illusions. She stuck to her principles. She refused to play the supporting actress game just to snag an Oscar. She walked away from Hollywood at times, risking her standing in the industry. She threw herself into tough roles that demanded genuine emotion. She lived on a ranch far from the hype and wrote candidly about how lonely it was. Above all, she believed in acting as an art form, a chance to step into someone else's reality. For viewers today, her work still has that ring of truth. It's no wonder so many who stumble upon her performances become loyal fans. In the end, it feels fitting that she's interred on family land tied to Frank Lloyd Wright, two visionaries in one lineage, each making a distinct mark in their own domain. Wright took on architecture, Baxter took on the stage and screen. They both created something lasting. And now we can salute an actress whose life was as varied and intense as the characters she played. Whether you prefer the manipulative brilliance of Eve, the sorrowful depth of Sophie, or the regal flair of Nefertiti, you're honoring someone who maintained a fierce devotion to her craft. In a world where image can overshadow substance, Anne Baxter's legacy shines as an example of genuine artistry, balanced by a personal quest for meaning that reached beyond Hollywood's bright glare.